Philip, you and I have known each other since 2012, but it wasn't until 2014 when I came to visit you in Paris that I asked the question, how did you get involved in TOC? And I was very surprised to learn that your history with TOC dates all the way back to the days of creative output in 1986. There are not very many of those people around anymore. So I would really like to hear you recount your journey in TOC, starting from the very beginning and your first interactions with Ellie Goldratt and what happened from there to bring you to where you are today.
A long story indeed. It started in 1986, yes indeed, and so I was 26 years old, and I've been using the theory of constraints ever since. So that does mean, without fail, without wavering, constantly in organizations, mostly industrial corporations, throughout the world. And so that means, we've accumulated a huge amount of experience because I started early, and I've just been doing it, very consistently. What did it start with? Maybe I should go back a little bit more and talk about the beginning of my career. I ended up in a factory in north of France making big pipes for the industry. Doing that, right, my first job, I discovered something that today we call lean, and I fell in love with that idea. But I was fascinated by it all, and I started for several years implementing lean. A bit later, young and naive, I thought that the problems of the companies that I was working with was in what we call today ERPs. And young and naive, I thought, with computer systems, the companies will be better managed. So I got into implementing ERPs. I was recommended to Ellie Goldratt, who just emerged in Europe. He'd been active in America, just published The Goal. Himself, his brother, and two other Israelis were selling a software for scheduling organizations. And it was called Optimized Production Technology, split OptServe more precisely. And that was, I split the company into two, bottlenecks and non-bottlenecks. I optimized the bottlenecks, and then the non-bottlenecks serve the bottleneck. Right? It was the beginning of what today we all know as drum buffer rope. But he walked into it initially through programming. So that's where it all started. And when he saw that people were misusing his software, he disappeared and wrote this novel, The Goal. Ellie Goldratt went around the company's his facilities explaining what he'd been doing. He'd set up a small organization in France for serving Europe for the software. So, I was one of the first. He mentions it in the prologue to The Goal in the later editions, where I asked him, what's going on? Why did you write The Goal? And we had, as usual with Ellie, an interesting conversation in which all he did was ask questions, as usual, no answers. And it was questions, so I said, why did you write The Goal? He said, instead of answering the question, he said, what's the most popular book in the world? Bestseller in the world? And I thought, it's hard. It's the Bible. What's the Bible? The Bible is a story to sell a concept. How would you market his strange ideas? He decided to write a novel that was going to be sold quite cheaply, a book. At the time, it was just a very brilliant idea. He was the first to do that. Right? Since then, we've had business novels quite frequently, but it was really a truly brilliant thing to do. Him and I think we should mention Jeff Cox for the quality of the writing, created this unidentified flying book, which is still active today.
Yes, it is.
Still fascinating, and people read it, and it's still just as fresh as it was when it was written, right? Anyway, so that's where I was in 1984. The book published. It started getting translated. It was immediately very popular. In 1986, I helped check the translations into French of the book The Goal, which, for those that don't know, today, 30 years later, is now translated into 32 languages and published 10 million copies, right? And certainly the theory of constraints would not have existed, or certainly not have existed as it is, without that very audacious act. That happened. He then decided to give up on the software side and went to pure consulting, Ellie Goldratt, and the theory of constraints movement. Okay, so I was still working in France. I ended up in an organization that was a software, a huge software firm that took over the rights to sell and implement the theory of constraints software, optimized production technology, and doing some consulting. I decided to write a book, a textbook about how you implement the theory of constraints in manufacturing. So in French, I claimed that the 5 focusing steps, I claimed at that stage, the 5 focusing steps of the theory of constraints are fine for people who begin the theory of constraints. It is an iterative process where you go bottleneck hunting from the first to the next and so forth, right? And that is the way you should start. But once you've been living with it for a while, you should probably stop and stand back and think, what is the least bad constraint in my system? Okay, and that was what my third book was, À la recherche du bon déséquilibre, since it was written in French, looking for the best disequilibrium, finding the best or the least bad bottleneck in my system. And that led to a lot of things in the rest of my career, because I think it's an important, interesting way of doing the theory of constraints. I repeat, to start off with, the classical way of doing it is fine, but comes a stage where probably the best thing to do is to organize your constraints and non-constraints properly, so that it makes the whole thing stable. But anyway, that's another subject. So I published that book in French in France after having come back from 3 years of sailing. It sold very well, and I joined the largest consultancy firm in France at the time, and started doing implementations of theory of constraints, or rather, right from the beginning, theory of constraints and lean, or theory of constraints and other ideas. For me, the theory of constraints was a beautiful object, but it never was the answer to all questions. So I did that in this large organization, and after 10 years of that, I ended up in top management with about 600 consultants working for my management committee. And then we got bought out by a computer services firm, and they started trying to force us all to sell ERP software. I quit and created my company. So we are now in 2005 in France, and I create my company. It's focalized essentially on industry, okay? And I guess what people have trouble understanding is what we do and what we don't do, because we do everything from dog food to luxury watches to cars to rockets to pharmaceuticals, basically anything. And in that world, we apply the theory of constraints and lean mostly, and in common sense, and a few other things that might turn out to be useful. Agile, if it's in a software community. I don't like the idea that the theory of constraints is the answer. What is your question? That sort of stuff. It irritates me.
I've heard that more than once.
But, and you can like something a lot without thinking it is the universal solution to all things. If you do it that way, I find the overall message is a lot more seductive, because whether people like it or not, the world in which I intervene of producing things has been marked significantly by Toyota, the Toyota way, and lean. Right? And if you try and say that my thing is better than lean, you're just losing half or 80% of the market anyway. So that's what we do, and we started doing it classically in manufacturing, the thing I knew best, how to produce faster, better quality, low cost and stuff, using theory of constraints and lean. A lot and more all over France, all over Europe, all over the world. A little later, I got serious with critical chain project management, and today we do about 40% operational excellence and 40% critical chain project management. And that's where we've got to. About 2017, I got a strange call that came in from the McDonald's corporation. And the new model was being deployed throughout the world, made for you. That's to say, you didn't make the food before the client arrived. Okay, you only made it when the person ordered it. Okay? And so, switching to the model that they had crashed their service times and created problems with their productivity. Anyway, so we applied the theory of constraints and lean to that, and that basically opened up the rest of the world to us, because of the rest of the kinds of manufacturing. So then we get really strange stuff, like a YouTuber for his producing his YouTube videos. We get luxury hotels. The constraint is in the service elevator. We get all kinds of strange startups. Right now, it's a real joy to go from one challenge to the next, because you have to always reinvent what you know or how you do it. I guess that's it. And just to finish off, one thing I haven't mentioned, but there are lots of other videos. I'm with you, Bill. We met 2012, so we're now developing this together, everything to do with the logical thinking process, and therefore strategy, clear thinking, and all these sorts of things. With all the work we've been doing together on logical thinking, which is powerful, and as you know, so yourself and Thorstein Sigurdsson, with whom we also have a partnership, they do it because I'm quite incapable of doing it. 1986 to today, now I've started counting, we're at about 318 implementations worldwide.
Wow. Well, you're to be congratulated. And I know that it is basically the summary result of your elemental curiosity about things.
The company's called Marris Consulting. You might get the impression it's just Philip Marris doing it. I don't anymore. You've had to learn to delegate because we've applied the theory of constraints to ourselves. If you're not going to watch out, the founder becomes the bottleneck. Right? A lot of stuff is not done by me. I don't visit, I don't know, I haven't shaken hands with most of our clients now. It's done by our team. And so the other necessary thing, it's not theory of constraints at all, is to create a team thing. So I want people to get the impression this is the Philip Marris story. This is the story of Marris Consulting, and you've had you've been able to meet my team, and you know who they are.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that detailed explanation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.